What's going on, everybody? My name is Nick.
My name is Dave.
And this is the Deep Dive. And first off, we want to say thank you for letting us have a week off, I guess. We took a week off last week because we had a Christmas performance last week, so there wasn't really much to talk about and all that good stuff. And this will actually be the last one of this year. We're going to take the 29th off as well.
Right.
So a couple little schedule change, but to give everybody a little bit of a break and enjoy the holidays and good stuff like that. And as we are approaching it, we do have a couple things to talk about first, which is the sermon today, where we're still in our Gifts of Presence series, and we're talking about joy today.
Joy today.
So, are you ready to get into this?
Let's go.
All right, Dave. Well, we could talk college football for 30, 40 minutes. I'll just say SEC was a little bit of a letdown so far in these playoffs.
Texas won.
Tennessee got blown out. Florida's not in the playoffs, though.
They're not in the playoffs, but they won their bowl game.
Yeah.
So I'm all things SEC through this. I want SEC to do well. But, they were kind of boring games, and Tennessee looked horrible. But that's probably enough update for that.
So we are approaching. I guess this will be released before Christmas, would be my guess. But do you have any fun Christmas traditions that you and your family do?
My wife always buys everybody pajamas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did y'all go with a theme this year? Do y'all have like funny ones, or is it just like the plaid ones?
They're not matching ones or anything. They're just pajamas.
Okay.
Very practical.
Y'all don't do the matching thing?
Not anymore. Maybe when the kids were little, but no. Now I think I've told you this before, but a couple of years ago, I was like, I don't think anybody needs any more pajamas because she's getting her Amazon list to do it. I was like, let's just skip the pajama things. And my kids on Christmas morning were like, where are the pajamas? And so
they were counting on it.
I think that's going to be a tradition. Yeah.
Good.
Of course, the big thing with me is I could be a grandfather any day now.
That's true.
So that we're kind of counting that down, and that's sort of the overarching over everything we do. We do have, Christmas Eve and Christmas Day plans with the family, but that could be
in flux.
Joyfully changed.
That's right.
If that happens. So how about you guys? What do y'all around here? I know you do family thing on Christmas Eve with your
my side of the family, we get together Christmas Eve, and then on Christmas Day we get together with Rachel's side. In terms of traditions, it's just kind of hanging out. We kind of take a more low key on Christmas Day, so everybody can kind of just hang out and enjoy being with each other, that type of stuff. And we went and saw
any good Christmas movies this year? Are you watching
just the classics?
You watch the classics.
The Home Alone.
There's a couple of new ones that are out. One of them called That Christmas, which I really liked quite a bit.
Is that the Netflix one?
I think it's on Netflix, and there's another Netflix one I watched yesterday, and it is billed as a Christmas movie, but it's very much in the Die Hard tradition of Christmas movies.
Okay.
And it's called On Board.
Okay, I've never seen it.
Jason Bateman's in it.
Yeah.
It's good.
I like good. This movement for like action Christmas movies.
It is an action Christmas movie. So when we got finished watching, I was going like, well, now I'm in the Christmas spirit.
That's right.
But
all these explosions and death and all all this stuff got you ready.
All right, so let's go through the sermon here.
Yeah, let's talk
real
about
quick. We have had a sermon series that's been based on the 4 seasons of Advent, are traditionally the words that we associate with each of the candles as we light them. And so we've come through hope, we've come through peace, we've come through love. This Sunday we looked at joy. And so I kind of began with a question, and that was, what are you waiting for? And so lots of times when people say, what are you waiting for? It's sort of like, get up off the couch and
let's go. Come on.
Yeah, it's
Get
kind
moving.
of a procrastination thing. But this is a different kind of waiting that I wanted to kind of tap people into. And it's kind of waiting that we really don't have any control of, or if we do, it's just very little control over.
Right.
Because all of us, I think, at one time in our life or another, find ourselves in that kind of season of waiting that we have no control over. It's just waiting for it to happen, waiting for it to pass, waiting for, some event or whatever. And And some of it can be good, and I referred to my becoming a grandfather and
Right.
the waiting of that's been very kind of joyful, although there is a little bit of like uncertainty with like, what's life going to be like now? It probably be more for Anna and Alex than us. We've been there, we know that, but as grandparents, how's that going to be? How's that's going to feel? So
One thing about that, real quick, as a fellow Christmas baby,
yeah,
make sure separate gifts.
Separate
When you
gifts.
say, don't do the combined thing.
yeah, she could be a New Year's baby. That's kind of what at this point is what I'm kind of hoping for her.
Yeah.
Is that it waits till after the
Because she's
first.
due Friday, right?
She's due
That's the
Friday,
planned day?
but if she doesn't come till after the New Year, there is a plan already that Anna will go in on January 1st in the evening to be induced, so she'd probably be born January 2nd.
Got it.
And that's kind of what we're all sort of emotionally
Prepping for
for, although it could come any minute.
any
So-
minute.
And so anyway, that is the kind of waiting. And the other kind of waiting, and it's like sometimes I'm a little reluctant to get into sort of a difficult, dark place during Christmas because I know people want things airy and joyful. But I also recognize that there are a lot of people that aren't in that space.
Yeah.
And having at one time in my life gone through a period of time like that, I wanted to talk about, because we are talking about Emmanuel, God with us. And that is the kind of waiting through a difficult season. And, I also had that kind of period of waiting this year with the death of my mother-in-law, Teresa's mom, Esther. We found out, I think in February, we found out that she had pretty aggressive cancer, and then she died in May. But the last 3 weeks, and you will remember because you guys just so, thankfully for me, covered for me during those 3 weeks. I think you preached 1 week, and
Sarah did.
Sarah preached that week just so that I could get through that time.
Yep.
And in a way, it is kind of a sacred and holy time when you're sitting there waiting. But it is life becomes on hold, and you're waiting, for this thing to happen,
Right.
this difficult thing to happen. And so I recognize, I could, I won't, but I can name some church members that we have that I've been in conversation with this week who are in that exact same situation. They're waiting for a loved one to die.
Yeah.
And it could be any day or it could be next month.
Right.
They don't know. And it's just that kind of waiting. In the season of Advent, traditionally, it is about waiting. It is waiting for the birth of Jesus, but also waiting for the second coming. And the reason we kind of enter into that season of waiting is before Jesus was born, the Israelites, they had been waiting for 400 years to hear from God.
Yep.
And gone through a very difficult, dark time, first by being under the Assyrian Empire, and then later on the Roman Empire and all the difficulties that took. And, they're crying out for God, and it's like, how long, oh God, will it be?
Yeah.
And so into the midst of all of this and this waiting, we have the story that we read this morning of the angel coming to Mary and telling her that she's going to become pregnant, miraculously pregnant, with Jesus.
She's like, how? I'm a virgin.
Yeah. So, and that, it's a beautiful story, but it's an interesting story that I think we can kind of gloss over and miss the impact that it would have had on this young, fairly simple girl, living in this little bitty town called Nazareth.
Yeah.
And having an angel visit her with this news.
And then you've been talking about waiting. I mean, even the waiting in that, could you imagine, this angel coming to you and then you waiting for this baby to be born, not knowing, the ramifications, and probably the emotional side of it is how am I equipped to take care for this child? Do you know what I mean?
All of that is joyful. As joyful as that would have been, and the good news of that, that Mary, who was highly favored of God, so God chose her,
right?
Because she was the person who could do it, and could handle it. But also, because she is going to go through some shaming from those around her, from the community that really probably should be supporting her through this. She's going to go through all of that, with carrying this baby, and then all of the frustrations and difficulties of then having to go to Bethlehem
Yep.
from Nazareth because the government has this census. And so even though in some ways it's a joyful time, it is also, I know, a very difficult time for Mary. But in the sense of that, and the words of the angel, because and this is another thing that I pointed out in the sermon, we don't talk about a lot, but particularly the Old Testament, they don't really have this concept that we have of the afterlife.
Right.
They kind of, if life is going to go on, it's going to go on through your descendants. And so having a descendant was very important. Of course, we have the story of Abraham
Yep.
and Isaac. But there are other Old Testament stories too, where there were people, and that were barren, and then miraculously God gifted them with a child. And so when God shows up here in the gospel, first the angels come to Elizabeth and also Zechariah, her husband. Those are the first ones they come to with this news of John the Baptist who's going to be born. So Elizabeth's very much sort of a Sarah kind of figure in that she's older.
Right.
But Mary is younger, actually, young girl, probably the type of age back in that time that people would have babies. But that for our modern time, 13, 14.
Yeah, I was going to say, was it like 14 or 15?
Yeah,
somewhere
very
in that
young.
range.
Very young, but Jesus coming in. So one of the points that I wanted to put on, first of all, was just the hope of a child, because the child meant something to Israel, maybe even a little bit different. I mean, it means a lot to us too, but maybe even a little bit different than what it does to us today. In that there's going to be a descendants, that's going to come from this. It's a baby that is a true blessing, the hope of a child. And so it was that for Mary, it was that for Israel, but it's also, I think, through Jesus' birth becomes this hope of a child for us as well.
Yeah.
And just, I try to stress a little bit that, Jesus did not come as a conquering king with an army. Jesus came in vulnerability, a little child.
Right.
Newborn baby.
Yeah. And I think that's such a weird concept for the people back then, because a lot of people were expecting that king with an army. They were looking for somebody who's going to conquer and provide that type of
100%, yeah.
more of a resource type thing than a spiritual thing.
A conquering ruler coming in, because they were under this rule of Rome, and they wanted somebody to come in there,
conquer, yeah.
and to kick some heads.
Right, yeah.
And so, but Jesus appearing the way he did, and of course on Christmas Eve we'll talk about the shepherds and who Jesus chose, or who God chose to give this good news to. We're not. It wasn't the royalty. It wasn't the important person. It wasn't the elites. It was to simple people, ordinary people,
Yep.
just like you and me,
Right.
And so like most of us, and so, we have that hope of a child that and what that represents to us, and then of course we were talking today about joy, and so where does joy come from, and particularly the kind of joy that we talk about in the Christian faith, because lots of times we connect joy and happiness almost as like meaning the same thing.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm very joyful. Oh, I'm very happy. And so if you don't have happiness, you don't have joy. But the Christian faith, the kind of joy that we're talking about here, the kind of joy that Mary's soul rejoiced in the Lord, is that it is this God, Emmanuel, that God is with us. That's what really gives us that kind of joy,
Right.
the joy of our faith. So,
Yeah, and like I've heard people talk about the difference in happiness and joy, and talking about happiness is more of a temporary emotion, where joy is kind of a state of being at some level. That doesn't mean that everything's always like rainbows and sunshines, but it's that you have this like hope and understanding that there's something bigger and better. Does it make sense?
Right, and like if your life, there's also this mistaken thing that to follow Jesus means you're just going to have this rosy, always happy kind of
skipping along.
But
rainbows.
that's not the path. That wasn't Mary's path. It wasn't Joseph's path. They were going to go endure a lot of difficult, hard things.
Yeah.
But there was this joy that was present because of God's presence. Which
Well, and I know in service you called out Carter and Michaela.
Oh, yeah.
They just had a beautiful baby, and
they were at church today.
they were at church today, which was awesome. But like going up to them and I gave them a hug and shake their, like, you can see the joy on their face.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, of just being able to show the kid off, but also to know that like something in their family was important.
But what a testimony to them too. It's
Yeah.
I would have taken the Sunday off.
Probably, yeah.
But I think they feel so connected to this church and wanted to share this joy with us. And
Yeah.
so it was a real gift to see them seated back there and get to see the baby.
Yeah, Carter told me too. He was like, I signed up for the men's retreat while we were waiting on this baby. I was like, dude, you the man, but you could have been there. We would have saved you a spot.
Yeah.
Which, real quick,
Yeah.
spot is, we got a men's retreat coming up in February 7th through 9th. We'd love to have you come. Anyway,
Yeah, that's
sorry.
right. You're right. Plugging that announcement where we can.
That's right.
And so, anyway, to get to the end, and sort of like my central illustration that I used was an old story, and it's probably been told. I have never told it here before, but I'm guessing some preacher somewhere along the line told the story of the I heard the bells on Christmas Day. You've heard that story before,
Absolutely.
right? Yeah. So, but it's such a, sometimes the reason these stories get repeated is because they speak right at the issue at hand.
Yeah.
And so, if you don't know, the song "I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day," which is in the hymn book, and it's a well-known Christmas carol, but Casting Crowns did a cover of it and actually an updated version of it, which is actually more powerful than
the original.
Than the original. Just the way it's kind of in a minor key, and
Okay.
yeah, and then it breaks out. Yeah, I love their version of it, and it gets played a lot around this time of year. But the backstory behind it is Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, who's a famous writer of the period. But it was during not World War I, during the Civil War, and so I think I didn't say the dates, but I think I've got those. You can check and correct me, but I think it was in 1862, which is during the Civil War. His wife dies tragically in a house fire. There's a fire, and he tried to save her, but she perished, and so that was a really hard thing, and he goes into grief with that. In the midst of that, like the next year, his son, the Civil War is going on. His son, and he did not want his son to become a soldier, but his son felt compelled to do his duty, and so his son signs up and goes off to war in the Civil War, and he is injured almost to the point of death. He does not die, but he's critically injured through that. Right. And so this was in 1864. So that next Christmas, it's a really dark time. Still grieving his wife. His son, he doesn't know if he's going to live or die. And he's just not feeling Christmas. And if you've ever been there, and I have, I shared that in the service, but if you've ever been through the holidays when everybody else is being joyful and you're just not there because of the grief that you're going on, because of life circumstances, that's where he was. Of course, there was also an awful war going on at this time too.
Right.
And so he wrote, in one of his journals, which we have, is that the holidays are a very, very sad time. And so on Christmas Day, he hears the Christmas bells.
Yeah.
And I'm sure everybody's celebrating at a service or whatever. And he writes this beautiful poem, which I don't have in front of me, but I'll give you the.
You can look it up.
I'll give you
we'll put a link or something.
Yeah, I'll give you the important lyrics. But on one of the verses, he said, there is, I heard the bells on Christmas Day. He says, there is no love, there is no joy, there is no peace on earth. Because hate and war have taken over. And then, continuing to hear those bells, he kind of experiences this Emmanuel. They're kind of calling out to him that, that God is not dead, nor does he sleep. Yeah. That in the end, and we don't know. It's that waiting thing. But God will win. You know, love will win. You know, faith will rule the day. And it's in that waiting that we're in. That's the season of waiting. So I ended up with the same question I began with. You know, what are you waiting for?
Yep.
I realized that all of us are in different places with that.
Yep.
You know, we're waiting for a grandbaby. Tinsley and any number of our kids are waiting for Santa Claus.
Yeah.
Your kids are probably waiting for Santa Claus
Absolutely.
too. Yeah. You know, but there are other people that are waiting by their loved one's bedside. You know,
Yeah.
we're all in the waiting, and that God is with us through all of this. So
Yeah.
that's the good news of the season.
And I think that's kind of the important reason why we do stuff like the longest nights and stuff like that, is just to make sure that we're trying to meet people in all of these spaces, you know, in the happiness and joy of the season, which we'll celebrate with, you know, the services and Christmas Eve and stuff like that. And then, you know, maybe the harder times we do with the longest night and stuff like that.
That's one of the great things, gifts of the Christian church, the Christian community, is that on any given Sunday, we might have people that are having one of the greatest weeks of their life.
Yeah.
You know, Carter and Michaela had a baby. And other people might be facing one of the darkest weeks of their life.
Yeah.
But yet, we're there together. We can hold one another up. We can cheer one another on, and we can comfort one another.
That's right.
So that's the gift of the church.
Amen. Amen. Well, as we are wrapping up here, we just want to say thank you guys so much for tuning in all year long with us. And also we want to wish you guys a very Merry Christmas. We hope you have a great time with your friends, with family, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
Well, very cool. I guess without further ado, you guys know the comments. If you have any comments, questions, you drop it in the chat below. And without anything, I got nothing else. Dave, you got anything?
This is a wrap on 2024 Deep Dive.
That's right.
The night.
Next year, we'll see you guys in 2024. All right.